and I am beyond delighted to be in a room with actual humans for the first time in what seems like forever. So yeah, I'm Jo O'Connor. I work for a vendor, one of the evil vendors, for Adobe. And I talk with customers pretty much every single day because my job is normally to look at what they're trying to do, look at their current landscape, whether it's from people, from technology, and see where Adobe can help. But today, we're not just relying on the anecdotes that I have in my head and the things that I can remember from various customer meetings. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about today comes from a survey that Adobe with eConsultancy runs every year. We call it our Digital Trends Survey, and it's hot off the presses in February. The 2022 survey was published. So a lot of the key trends I will be talking about is based off information in that particular survey. So there's some facts and figures behind it. It's not just Jo talking about what she sees. So we always have to do, and Mats, thank you so much for sharing our secrets. Of course, we always have to talk about 7 this or 5 that because it makes for a good topic in a conversation. But today I want to talk about the 7 trends, and the one that I consider to be the most important is this one, that change is accelerating. The only thing that is sure now and in the future is that stuff is going to change. And that pace of change has only been increasing. We've definitely seen it over the pandemic, particularly. There has just been a massive acceleration in the changes that organizations are having to make to keep up with changes in customers, changes in their organizations, and changes within external factors. So we've been running this digital trends report for a number of years now, and what we saw on our report was we have had over 7 years of progress in less than 12 months. So if things had been going along at the same trend that we've seen in the previous years, we wouldn't have expected to see what we see now until like 2030, 2031. There has been massive acceleration about what organizations are having to do. They're having to move 20 or 25 times faster than they were expecting before to be responsive to what's happening. When we do that report, we categorize the respondents, and there's like 10,000 people who respond to this particular survey. We categorize them as either being leaders, mainstream, or laggards. And that other change that is accelerating is the people who we categorize as leaders, and they were about 1/3 of the respondents. They are now starting to pull away from the pack. So these are people who'd put in place processes, training programs, technology as well, and I work for a technology vendor, so obviously I'm interested in the technology, but they'd been putting things in place in previous years. They even accelerated their investment over the pandemic, and now when we're coming out on the other side, they're able to take advantage of that, and we're seeing a massive gap opening up between those leaders and those mainstream. It's going to take huge investment, I think, for the mainstream and definitely for the laggards to start to catch up with this particular, the gaps that we're seeing. It means that things that used to be nice to have, like we would talk about it, I mean, we saw it in some of the word clouds that Mads showed. Things like, oh, we'd like to have data, and we'd like to have organizational processes, and we'd like to have orchestration and things working together in the organization, but we basically didn't. And people would work around it. I still work with organizations where they're sending data around on spreadsheets, which you should not be doing, by the way. Anybody who's still doing that, stop it now. But we have become very good, and marketing automation practitioners are really good at working their way around problems. But what the last 5 years between regulatory changes, COVID, all the massive changes we're seeing in the world around us has shown is those workarounds are now coming to the end of their natural life. And it's the people who have been working towards the changes that they could see were coming, knowing that we're in this changeable solution, who are able to now pivot and take advantage of what's happening afterwards. So if you take nothing else from these 7 trends, just be aware that whatever you think is happening today is not what's happening tomorrow, and it's definitely not what's going to be important next year or the year after. Things are going to change. There is no perfect solution. There is no perfect process. There's no perfect employee who has every single skill that you're going to need now and forever. Change is the only constant. But what we are seeing then with our customers, as I said, they're seeing massive acceleration of where they've seen like 7 years of progress in about 12. Is the slide moving on? Oh, it's going. I do that. Okay. So we have seen people, I've seen 7 years of progress in about a year. They're having to move much faster. The other key change on this change is accelerating is the barriers to entry on experience, which used to be the thing we said was the easiest thing to deliver. You couldn't create back-end systems. You couldn't create a whole legacy overnight, but you could create a compelling customer experience relatively easier. The barriers to developing a good customer experience are getting higher. It's harder now to create that compelling customer experience. And one of the key things to be aware of is customers are no longer comparing you to your category. They're not comparing you to other financial services providers or a different retailer or whoever it is that they think they're dealing with. They are comparing you to their last best experience anywhere. So the standards that customers and employees are expecting are only ever getting higher. So for example, when we talk to customers, apparently I can't do slides today. So when I talk to people like Walgreens, for example, they realised that they actually needed to make wide-scale changes in order to be able to deliver that seamless customer strategy because the only constant is change. So it was their pre-existing investments that meant that they could pivot when they needed to as the world was changing around them. Which brings us to our second key change. The customer is becoming more demanding. It's okay. The customer is becoming more demanding. I think if I've been giving this presentation for the last 5 years or so, this has been probably a constant thing that we always say customers are asking for more and more. And my slides are going crazy. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. I will click on the iPad. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So the customer is only becoming more demanding. The key things, the customer does not care about your problems. They do not care about your gap between online and offline. They don't care about your supply chain problems and the logistics issues we've had. We saw this 2 years ago when we all had to lock down and we had to make massive changes immediately. Customers were not that forgiving. They were going where they could get what they wanted as soon as possible. They expect organizations to allow them to shift between touch points, between different parts of the journey, and they expect you to follow on. They also expect you to do it whilst respecting their data privacy and their other preferences that they give you. Sometimes that might feel like an unrealistic expectation, but that is absolutely where we're coming at this moment. They expect excellence at every single step in the journey. That has been a constant trend, and it has only accelerated in the last 2 years. And it's also been where we're starting to see real differentiation in the market, where the people who are delivering these customer expectations are seeing massive improvements compared to the people who are not able to deliver that for whatever reason. It could be out-of-date technology, it could be poor data control, poor education or skills gaps or poor processes, all sorts of logistical issues they might have. But I cannot express enough, the customer does not care. They just want their good experience, and they are comparing you to other people who give them good experiences wherever they happen to have those experiences from. It's also leading to increased privacy consciousness. So we are starting to see a trend where organizations that are able to show they can be trusted with customer data to use it appropriately are starting to see a benefit with, increased customer retention, increased customer acquisition and loyalty from customers because they're aware that their data will be used appropriately. So essentially, now there is just this massive urgency that you need to be able to give a customer a compelling experience at every single step in their journey, which is also leading into our organizations and our employees, because guess what? Our employees are also customers. If they're demanding as customers, they come into the organization being demanding as well. If they want as a customer that, you can just keep track of them, they should be able to use a simple system, things should be available to them in apps, for example. You think they don't have those demands when they work for you as well? Everybody's been reevaluating where they are for the last 2 years. In America, they're calling it the Great Resignation. People are voting with their feet as well, and they are demanding tools and processes in their organizations in the same way that they would be demanding as a customer. The place where we're seeing the biggest change is that most forgiving of areas in the past has always been B2B marketing. They, for some reason, have been allowed to put up with poor systems, poor organizational processes. They're just meant to work around it. But now those business customers are also demanding exactly the same kind of experience as a normal consumer. And then those business marketers are also expecting tools and processes to help them do their job. Customers are your employees, and if you do not help your employees do their job appropriately, they will leave because their satisfaction goes down. They know they can't deliver on the good customer experience. They know they can't deliver on the business goals, and they are voting with their feet as much as anything else. The other key change that again has been a constant is regulatory change. Whether it's been GDPR, e-privacy, CCPA, Schrems 1, Schrems 2, we all know that regulatory change has been coming, and it is only accelerating. It is fragmenting. So even in a place like the EU, where we have EU-level regulations, we're starting to see now differentiation at a country level. So it's not appropriate. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all policy about how I deal with my data, how I manage my privacy, how I manage consent, because it's going to be different from market to market. Any processes you set up, any systems you set up that don't acknowledge that simple fact are doomed to failure. It also means a really key thing. In a lot of organizations, particularly those ones that I would say are like mainstream or laggard, when I go to them and I talk to them about privacy and consent and those kind of topics, I get told, oh, it's that team over there. That's their responsibility. It is not their responsibility. It has to be pervasive to everybody in the organization who has to communicate or deal with customer data. Because understanding your customer data, understanding what you are allowed to do with it is going to drive marketing strategy, business strategy. It's going to give you the boundaries within which you can operate. It's, you know, back in the old tech days, we'd talk about, you know, you had to design with security from the very beginning. If you try to apply security at the end of a project, it was doomed to failure. Compliance, regulations and privacy is exactly the same thing. If you do not design with that in mind from the very beginning of how you want to communicate with a customer, you are going to, well, make some very expensive mistakes is the possibility. But the other key thing is it's no good putting in place these huge systems to design for the regulations we have today when we know those regulations are only going to change, or they need to be fractured in order to deal with particular markets. So you need agility whilst you have control. And the only way that can be scaled out is if all the organization has this as part of their central core being, that regulation is there and it is something to be obeyed, not something to be worked around. That then is leading back to customer trust as well. So the organizations that do this the best are able to show to customers they can be trusted with the data, which is making them more likely to be loyal to you. So there's the whole heap of virtuous circles going on with all these trends as well. The other key one has been ecosystem changes. So for those of you who are not aware, for example, the cookie is disappearing, or the third-party cookie is disappearing. But there have been huge amounts of ecosystem changes over the years. This is just the latest big one. And it's a fundamental change to how we do marketing. For the last 10, 15 years, the third-party cookie has been the cornerstone of many organizations' marketing efforts. They've been using third-party cookies when it probably wasn't the best thing to do, but we got used to doing it. People have pivoted entire organizations and departments around the care and feeding of the third-party cookie, enabling you to talk with your customers, to talk to them when they're not on your property. These really long conversion funnels before they come anywhere near you, because we can follow you around the internet and all the different touch points through the use of third-party cookies. And they are going away. And organizations are fundamentally not addressing this. This is the attitude I still get in a lot of organizations. Their head is in the sand. They are assuming that some magic is going to happen and somebody is going to wave a magic wand and is going to allow them to continue doing what they've always done. Because this changes everything. It changes the kinds of campaigns I can do. I can't do acquisition campaigns anymore in the same way I'm used to without third-party cookies. I have to go back to the old days where I'm kind of, targeting based on demographics and, just random ads in particular destinations. It means that I have to be much more cognizant of keeping the customers I've already got, giving them a brilliant experience so they don't go to somebody else because it's going to be much harder for me to acquire. It changes how I measure success. It's going to change how much it costs to run a media campaign. Everything that we're used to running is changing. The reports that entire departments are used to using are no longer applicable in this days without third-party cookies. And this was meant to be happening this year. There's been a stay of execution because Google delayed their removal of third-party cookies until next year. But I still go to many organizations who are going, yeah, we should really think about that. That's something we should be maybe thinking about what we're going to do. The time to experiment and do this stuff was last year or the year before that. If you haven't done it already, you need to start thinking, how are we going to change as an organization, as a marketing and business strategy to address the death of a third-party cookie? And your marketing automation team, by the way, will have some very good ideas about what you might want to do under those circumstances. But believe me when I tell you, the better use of first-party and zero-party data should be a key part of your strategy, unless you're going to basically give everything to one of the walled gardens and just trust that they will get you the customers that you want without you being able to see the data that you're using. The other one that we're seeing is the skills demand is changing. And this is really scary for your employees. That change that's accelerating means that you're asking them to do more and more stuff that they've never been trained, they've never been asked to do before. So we're seeing organizations that are actually investing in employee training are seeing huge benefits. But also be aware that there is fear in the organization because people don't know if they can learn the new skills. They're worried that they're going to be made redundant. You cannot recruit your way out of a skills gap. Those unicorn employees that have this smorgasbord of all the skills that you want do not exist, or they are prohibitively expensive and there just aren't enough of them. The only way you're going to be able to get out of the skills gap is if you do more training, more employment, more enablement of your workforce. And we see then that things start to combine together. When we look at the pink line, which is about the laggards and the mainstream, what we're seeing is people who've got poor technology and processes, poor skills, are the ones that are seeing it hardest for them to actually achieve their marketing goals. So getting these skills up, it has to be a key thing that you drive resources towards, whether that's technical, business or strategy skills. And then the last one, collaboration. We all know that the chief marketing operator has been getting more important of recent years. They're often at board level now. The relationship between marketing and IT is absolutely key because, do not doubt me, marketing is becoming more technical. It has to be. With the regulatory challenges, with the data challenges, it's becoming more of a technical discipline. So marketing and IT do have to work hand in glove. And I would say that at a board level, we're kind of seeing those changes. We're seeing a lot more collaboration between the CIO and the CMO. That is not trickling down to where people are actually doing their job. When you get down to that, they're still in separate silos. You've got budget that's held by IT that a marketing operations person has no idea how they put forward a claim so they can free up that budget to do the thing that they need to do. Or they don't know how to do it. They need advice from IT, but they've got no way of making that two-way communication. So it's great that at the top level we're starting to get more collaboration, we're starting to get that kind of good relationship, but it is useless to a corporation unless you can figure out how to push that down to the layers of the hierarchy as well, to make it more possible for the marketers and the IT people to work together, not to work against each other. And the fact of the matter is, all the CMOs and CIOs of the world clapping each other on the back and saying, hey, we're best friend, if they don't make organizational changes, nothing is going to change. And one of the key organizational changes that I would say as well is you need to start to learn to embrace failure. Failure is good. People failing is a good thing because it means they're trying stuff. Punishing people for failing is not a good idea. As long as they fail fast, they fail small, so before they've done the global rollout, failures are all very good. And when you get into a fighting competition of, oh, we wasted that budget because we gave it to marketing, it didn't do the thing we wanted. Or you said if you got a CDP, it would fix everything that we wanted to do. When we do these kinds of things, it makes people scared to try new things. It makes the silos get more silo-y because they're just trying to protect their empire. So essentially, collaboration needs to be company-wide. I didn't say it was easy, but it needs to start coming down from the top and trickling down into the bottom of the organization as well. But the key thing is if we can take these key trends and essentially reorient around customer experience, which I work for a customer experience company, of course I would say that, unlock the creativity of your teams by enabling them, by allowing them to fail, by training them in the new things that they're going to need to be able to do, and starting to pivot towards data action rather than data collection. You can have the biggest data lake in the world, frankly. If you can't activate on that data, it is completely useless. It's even worse than useless. It is an active risk to your company because you're storing data that you're almost certainly going to get screwed over on at some point. But if we can do these things, essentially, we can ride this kind of chaotic wave that we're currently in, and the companies that do this pivot around customers, collaborate better, enrich their teams and get control of their damn data are the ones that are going to be the marketing automation leaders of the future, and they are going to be driving their business success. So when we talk to you next year and the year after, I hope to include you in those leaders groups as well as you try and put some of these trends into practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Apparently I'm out of practice on how to run a presentation when I'm standing in
yeah,
front of a room full of people.
but it's a little bit slow. The clicker is a little bit slow, so it's always stresses. I felt that too, but we checked that in the break. A lot of good trends there, and also, of course, feel like a lot of challenges, especially when you say that both customers and employees increase the demands and require more and more from the companies.
It's a perfect storm, I think. I think and everybody who works in even like the old school marketing automation, we can talk about definitions. They're often making they've done heroic things with poor resources, poor processes. I see them kind of bridging gaps all over the place. But the key thing that's been happening, as we try and scale out personalization, because that's normally what I talk about. We're trying to do personalization at scale. Those gaps, those problems are just exploding as soon as you try and scale them up. You can't apply machine learning or AI to dirty data. You can't automate a process where you've got, June and accounts having to send a regular Excel file to somebody. Those kind of make, do and mend that we've been doing for years and years and years are now coming to bite people in the bottom really, really hard because you can't scale up from that kind of position. It's also meaning for some companies, I think, there's a natural assumption that everybody wants to just do things in small iterations, and I don't really like big bang projects. I would normally agree with that, but we're getting to some really hard choices now where there's fundamental things that need to change, and it's not enough to just kind of massage it a little bit or just do the next bit. It's requiring changes in business strategy, potentially technology changes, definitely process and organizational changes. And for some companies who've delayed doing this for a long time, it's like all this crap is now happening. It feels like a surprise to them, even though this has been going on for years. But now is the time where they have to suddenly do everything at the same time in a time of war and global pandemic and all the rest of it.
Don't forget to or remember to enter your questions in the chat function. And Daniel here beside me will check that, or raise your hand here in the studio. I get a feeling that also that customers, as you said, demand more and more, and also from smaller companies, they don't bother if it's a large or small company. Also, maybe that they compare companies from different industries because they compare the ones they have relations with and experience from. But companies very often check all the competitors and know exactly what they're doing, but not really looking into the other industries. Is that so? Do you agree?
Absolutely, and I think that's the key. One of those key trends, like as I said, the customer's not comparing you with somebody else in your industry. They're comparing you with, like I say, the last time they did something really cool in an app, and they don't see any reason why they, when they're dealing with their bank, why they can't do what they, I mean, if I can go to a retail app and say, I want to book a changing room and a personal shopper, and I can do that at a whim, why on earth can't I just tell my bank, hey, I need to talk to a bank advisor because I want to talk about a mortgage, and just do it? Why do I have to go through some whole separate process? So yes, they see no differentiation at all. And the other one is then, as everything has been moving more digital, frankly, if you do not deliver what they want, it's really easy for them to find somebody else to deal with. And then you've lost them forever, especially now we're losing third-party cookies. You may never be able to get them back, or at least not for a very long period of time.
Good. Daniel, any questions?
No.
No? You do what I say. Did you also note that actually this was the first time that Joe agreed with me?
It has to happen occasionally. Well, he'll stop asking me back if I'm always nasty to him.
That's true. Just one last question here is maybe private, or not a private one, but that I have really. That is actually, you talked about this third-party cookies problem, and we talked about it a lot here at Advanced Relations. But and Facebook and Insta now, I mean, we really got used to using that as a big channel for marketing and communication and relations and all that. Is that not working any longer?
It is.
Is that what you say?
It still can work. So there's different approaches to how to solve the problem. So Facebook and Google, to a certain extent, they both act as sort of like walled gardens, and you can still kind of operate within that walled garden to a certain degree the way you've been used to, just without access to the data. So you can just put your media spend in there and do your thing. They've been pivoting as well. So the key thing is we're pivoting towards, we call them stable identifiers. So instead of third-party cookies, you're using an email address or a customer ID or a phone number, something like that. It's hashed, by the way. You're not just sharing it in the clear, but we're moving towards these stable identifiers, and Facebook, for example, allows you to use those kind of stable identifiers. So they're pivoting as well. The biggest change it's making is, how do I do a media buying program when I don't have access to the data to assess how good my media programs are running? So that's where you're starting to get the, if you're in only one walled garden, you're fine. But how do I kind of do media spend between different walled gardens? And then how do then I sort of join it up with the kind of more direct marketing I'm doing as well? So Facebook, social media is still a hugely important channel, but the mechanism of how you use it is absolutely changing, and it's fundamental to how you want to do your marketing strategy.
Good, thanks. Time for the next